Farzana Ahmed Joli, and today I'll be talking to you about fighting fundamentalism and extremism with tolerance. So I'll be having 20 minutes to discuss this topic, and I will start by defining some of the core concepts so we're on the same page. First of all, the main question is, what is fundamentalism? We often associate fundamentalism with religious extremism, but is fundamentalism really has to do something with religion? Or is it a broader concept? So one of the definitions by the Special Rapporteur on the Freedom of Association is that fundamentalism or fundamentalist movements are not just any movements, but they are movements of the extreme right, which manipulate religion, culture, or ethnicity in order to achieve a political aims. So the basic thing is they are not only simply religious one, but any far-right movement that advocates a strict and literal adherence to a set of basic beliefs or principles. So at the bottom line, fundamentalism is not about terrorism or about extremism or even religion. It is simply intolerance of any sort of difference, of opinion, of values, or of belief systems. Now that we have defined what fundamentalism is, we want to define extremism in relation to it. So fundamentalism and extremism have many similarities. But when we talk about extremism, it has more to do with a greater scale in terms of violence, in relation to fundamentalism. So one of a very interesting definition that I used to use in my academic life is one by International Center for Counterterrorism. And it says that extremists seek to re-establish what they consider the natural order in society. Now, this natural order can be based on race, can be based on class, can be based on faith or ethnic superiority or any alleged tradition. And usually, as compared to fundamentalism, extremism actually has an action plan which is aimed at taking communal or state power and holding on to it. And both at the core, extremism and fundamentalism, reject universal human rights and show a lack of empathy and disregard of rights of other than their own people. So in short, they reject diversity and pluralism in favor of a very preferred monoculture society. And often they portray themselves as being threatened. Now I made a very simple table that shows the similarities and the differences between extremism and fundamentalism. So there are 3 or 6 set statements, and I show here if fundamentalism agrees to that and extremism actually fits into that. So number 1, both of them manipulate the tenets of tradition, culture, religion, ethnicity to present a monotheist version of beliefs and values. For example, as you know, the Taliban have banned education for women in Afghanistan. There's systematic killing of progressive women in Afghanistan. But when we look back at what Islam really is, we know that our Prophet Muhammad married a woman like Khadija, who was an example of independent and financially stable woman who actually supported Muhammad. So are we really promoting Islam, or are we promoting a minority version of Islam to actually advance the political aims of a certain group? So it really manipulates the traditional tenets of any culture or religion in order to promote a certain view, which perhaps is not true for that entire religion or culture, or the majority of people practicing that religion or culture. Another thing is that both advocate for a very strict and literal adherence to a set of beliefs. Another one is that they're very intolerant to difference and reject any form of diversity or pluralism. So there's only one version of truth and only their worldview. There cannot be multitude worldviews, and people who promote a different worldview are not going to be accepted. And this can be any movement of the far right. It does not necessarily have to do with ethnicity, culture, nationality, or religion. And then the major difference between fundamentalism and extremism. Extremism is more of an organized system. It is organized and it possesses an action plan to take over and hold state power and communal authority. Another thing is that not both, but Fundamentalism is not always violent and designed to harm those who are not able to abide by their worldview. But extremism always is violent and designed to harm those people who do not abide by their worldview. Now that we have understood these concepts, let's move on to legal frameworks. Legal frameworks are what guarantees our human rights. The most fundamental of this legal framework is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and it states that all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. And this has nothing to do with their belief systems, language, race, religion, cultural heritage. We all are equal and we have equal freedom to express ourselves and our differences. The International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, which is based on Article 27, it guarantees the rights of each person as well as each group to develop and express their humanity, their worldview, and meanings they give to their existence and their development through their own values, beliefs, languages, knowledge, and the arts and ways of life. That means that cultural rights is a protected right, and no monoculture can take away our right to express our worldview and our understanding of our world or our creativity. Cultural rights also protect our access to and enjoyment of cultural heritage, freedom and artistic expression, and scientific freedom. Now, when we look at the legal frameworks that protect our rights, our cultural rights, our rights to inclusivity, our rights to express ourselves as individuals, we have to understand what this intolerance of difference has done to our society. Since time immemorial, extremists have attacked educational institutions that promote scientific knowledge and promote critical thinking. We all remember the incidents of April 2014 when 276 girls were kidnapped in a high school in Nigeria by Boko Haram. We still hear of the systemic killing and murder of girls who go to school in Afghanistan. Back in 2015, when I was in Kenya, there was this attack on Garissa University by the Al-Shabaab. And the students who were coming out were saying in the interview that they were only targeting Christian students. And the Al-Shabaab group, which is Islamist military group, were asking us to recite Surah Al-Fatiha if we're Muslim, and if we're not able to recite it, they would shoot us point blank. In the Islamic State of Iraq and Levant, children are obliged to follow a curriculum where subjects like music, history, and social studies have been removed and replaced by what is deemed as religious instructions. There are many educators who have actually refused to teach these children, and these educators have been actually killed. Now, when we move on to what has this fundamentalism or intolerance of difference done to other people who are different than us? For example, we all remember the 2016 US presidential election. There was a very violent rhetoric against immigrants, against people of color. There was violent not only rhetoric but also attacks on them. And this was really stemming from the president-elect's campaign. So when the president-elect himself is promoting such violent rhetoric within the campaign, you can imagine the state of a country and what such minority groups face in the country. There has been systemic violence committed against lesbian, gay, and bisexual and transgender people. For example, the Transgender Pride Parade in Croatia. Some of the Catholic clergy argued that the participants at the 2011 parade over there got what they deserved because they were attacked. In fact, a professor at the Catholic Theology College said that the lynching of these lesbian, gay, bisexuals and transgender marchers was very much needed. Again, we hear the case of the Shira Banki murder. Remember in July 2015 when marchers in Jerusalem parade were assaulted by this ultra-orthodox man and who just killed Shira Banki, who was a very passionate teenager going out there to support her friends for equality and dignity of all human beings. But imagine what happened to her. So these things have been continuing and will continue unless we start learning how to be an inclusive culture. Another aspect of this fundamentalism is when we come to the artistic expression of many artists. Many artists through centuries have been attacked by fundamentalism and fundamentalist and extremist group because they're trying to promote an alternative way of thinking. They're promoting alternative ways and values and promoting critical thinking. So we remember the Palestinian poet Ashraf Fayyad, who actually was sentenced to death in 2015 by a Saudi Arabian court for accusations including apostasy and promoting atheism. Later, his sentence was reduced to 8 years in prison and 800 lashes. And what was his main crime? His poetry was mainly about his own life experiences and philosophies of being a Palestinian refugee in Saudi Arabia and what he was going through. It is also said that this happened to him, targeted him because he reported that the religious police were actually lashing a man on the street, and he taped it and posted it online. So why are these artists being really targeted? We have to question ourselves again. We also remember the 2014 assassination of Sado Ali Warsame. Sado Ali Warsame was a very prominent singer of Somali descent, and she later took on parliamentary and political roles in Somali. And why was she really assassinated? Because she went bareheaded on stage to sing, because she did not put a hijab, because she did not fit into the version of what an Islamic woman should be, because she was promoting political critique in her songs. Again, we hear about Ahmed Sabri, who is actually a wonderful Sufi singer and who actually used to sing during Ramadan, just before the breaking of fast. And what happened to him? The Taliban assassinated him on causes of blasphemy. Blasphemy of what? Blasphemy to promote thinking about God, of making a relationship with God that only you can define. How can only one aspect of religion be the only religion that is possible? In 2015 and 2016 in Bangladesh, there was a spate of attacks targeting secular activists, bloggers, and atheist writers. In 2015, murders of, we hear of Washikur Rahman Babu and Abhijit Roy, who are secular bloggers and journalists. Publisher Faisal Arifin Dipan was also hacked to death. But due to government's action of actually targeting this Islamist militia who were doing this to the secular bloggers and journalists, this has actually stopped. Now, what can actually be done about it? What can be done to promote a culture of inclusivity? What can be done so people are able to understand that the differences between us do not really create separation, but the differences between us unify us and make us a more diverse culture, a more diverse society? One aspect of it is tolerance. But what is tolerance? Is it really only about tolerating you? I tolerate your artistic expression, but I do not accept it. Is it really about that? But is it really about also questioning our own value system and understanding that we are a composition of many things around us? We are not only our religion, we are not only our race, we are not only our genders. We are a multitude of things that make us. And what makes us is diverse. And the uniqueness of each individual is what creates a healthy society. And in a society where people are free to express themselves, their opinions and perspectives with respect to other people's opinions and perspective, is a society we are trying to create. So it is not only about tolerance, it's also about accepting the diversity in our society. So when we talk about this tolerance and acceptance of diversity, we are talking about arts, education, science, and culture. These are one of the best tools to fight fundamentalism and extremism. And these are critical to creating alternatives, making space for peaceful contestation, and promoting inclusion. Even in this era of rising extremism and fundamentalism, we have seen that states are generally wanting to spend more on military, but instead of cultural funding, funding to have spaces where people can discuss these differences, places where people can discuss why terrorism is the problem, places where people can understand the minority and what their demands are. We see less and less funding for these cultural spaces and more funding for military spending, which is creating more of a culture of fundamentalism and extremism and lack of understanding. This is why the UNESCO's recommendation that government has to use at least 1% of their total expenditure for culture must be respected by all states. It is just 1%, and states must make this a priority. It is also very crucial to preserve existing spaces and institutions, as well as creating new ones for people to learn and develop their creativity and experience the humanity of everyone else, and exercise their critical thinking for civic engagement. When someone expresses their opinion, it is not meant to create a harm for you. It is meant for you to listen to them and understand where you stand and bring yourself to a common understanding. We do not want to create a polarized world. We want to create an inclusive world. The civil society today is also fighting fundamentalism and extremism, but they do require resources. Their reach is very limited. Their structures are very limited. Their access to media outlets is very limited. And for the civil society's efforts to actually crystallize, we need more funding for them. We need media outlets to promote their work. And we need it to become more systemic and institutionalized. What we see, for example, Girls Not Brides campaign, whereby they're trying to promote the idea that girls should actually have a chance to be educated, to go to college, to fulfill their dreams and not be married by the age of 18 for the purpose of serving a man and his desires and his egos. When we try to promote that culture, it is not only enough to have laws, it is also important to promote this kind of attitude and thinking as individuals in our individual lives through what we do, and also culturally through what we promote. And civil society is a huge part in doing that. So we have to encourage the civil society movements, we have to fund them, we have to support them as well in order to create such an inclusive culture. Thank you.